Fotovoltaico Made in EU, quali prospettive per l'industria manifatturiera? Questo è il prossimo tema di cui vogliamo occuparci. C'è un dato intanto che vogliamo dare sull'Europa. Abbiamo sentito parlare prima di giugno come periodo di picco. Ebbene, in qualche modo l'Europa un tassello storico quest'anno l'ha messo, intanto che vedo che si cambia anche la platea, magari qualcuno è più interessato ad un tema piuttosto che ad un altro. Quest'anno l'Europa sicuramente un traguardo storico in qualche modo l'ha raggiunto, perché a giugno proprio l'energia solare è diventata per la prima volta la principale fonte di produzione elettrica europea. Consideriamo tutto il continente, ha coperto il 22% del fabbisogno totale, che a livello continentale è tanto, anche perché quando parliamo di Europa ha superato ad esempio anche il nucleare. Il motivo ovviamente è che abbiamo installato tanto, ma anche che il cambiamento climatico si è fatto sentire. Però a parlarci, ho lasciato anche un po' di tempo, vediamo se abbiamo aperto il collegamento, sicuramente a raccontarvi meglio di me cosa sta succedendo in Europa. Welcome. Eccola qui, torna anche quest'anno Walburga Hemetsberger, ce l'ho fatta quest'anno? Is it right? Yeah. Ok, collegata in streaming con noi, so I'll give you the stage for your speech.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. I hope you can hear me well. My name is indeed Walburga Hemetsberger. I'm leading the European Solar Association, SolarPower Europe, based in Brussels, and it's really a pity I cannot be with you today. I understand there's a full room, a sold-out event. Congratulations to that, and a very good atmosphere. So I would have liked to be with you in person. But allow me to give you a couple of insights and share a couple of thoughts with you online. First of all, I should say that SolarPower Europe, we're representing the European solar sector, more than 300 companies, but also national associations, upstream and downstream, so the manufacturing side of things, but also the deployment side of things and everything in between. So we're kind of the counterpart of Italia Solare on the European level. And we are very grateful for the fantastic collaboration we have with Italia Solare throughout the year. So thanks very much for that. Yeah, in order to give you an overview on what is happening on the manufacturing side of things with the European manufacturing industry, I think it's worthwhile, first of all, to see what the market is doing in Europe. Where do we stand with the market? Because in the end, you need to have a market to sell your products to. So allow me just for a very short moment to put a spotlight on the European market. I should tell you that we will be coming up with the latest market figures in just a couple of days' time on the 11th of December, where we will be launching our latest European solar market outlook figures. So join us for the webinar that we are hosting if you're interested. But without further ado, where we stand today is indeed, we had some stellar growth years, you know that. We have been having growth years in Europe ranging from 40 to even more than 50% in certain years. But what you see here is that the market growth is flattening out. We added 4% in the last year. That brought us to 65 gigawatt and installed in 2024. And it will even be less, spoiler to the market figures that we will be announcing in a couple of days' time, will even be less for 2025. There's many reasons for that. Negative prices is one, household prices, electricity prices that have gone down is another one, but it's a fact that the growth is flattening out. Now, that is a problem because it is putting Europe's 2030 targets for solar at risk. You do know that the European Commission has set a target for solar to achieve 750 gigawatt of solar capacity by 2030. We would need to have 70 gigawatts installed every year as of now until 2030 in order to get to that level. We are not reaching this level at this point in time. At the last year's announcement, the last year's analysis shows that we would be reaching round about 723 gigawatt. And again, there's an update coming up in a couple of days' time. What do we need? Very clearly, the solution is adding flexibility to the system through electrification and flexibility assets. And the benefit it would bring, and just to take you quickly through the graphs, that's from one of our studies, Mission Solar 2040, are manifold. There's a benefit to the energy system at large, because we would have annual savings already by 2030 of more than 30 billion and even more than 160 billion yearly by 2040 if we're adding a lot of flexibility to the system. At the same time, our consumers would pay lower electricity prices. And for the business, for the solar business, there's good news as well, because there's lower curtailment and less negative prices. So adding flexibility to the system is the solution. More flexible demand from more electrification. We're stagnating at the moment. Electrification stagnates at 23% of the energy mix. That is not good. And we need to add a lot more flexibility assets. And this is the last slide on the market. So we need much more battery storage. We are running a campaign at the moment, 10 times more battery storage by 2030. We just published a battery storage action plan together with also the Battery Storage Europe platform. So this is what we need to push big times in order to make sure that we are forging ahead with fast pace in the energy transition, having solar at its core. So this is the market. Now, you have been asking me to shed a light on the manufacturing segment, and more particularly manufacturing in Europe. We've been running a campaign for quite a while. It's called Make Solar EU. That's one of the visuals that we are using for that campaign. We have a bi-weekly newsletter you can subscribe to, where we're getting you the latest news. But the question is, where are we going? Quo vadis on manufacturing in Europe? European solar manufacturing, we are lagging behind. That's the very clear message. The European Commission has set a goal of 30 gigawatt by 2030. And it is very clear from the graph that you see here that we are nowhere near in most of the segments of manufacturing. We only have 4 years left. Where we do have some sizable capacities that are getting close to 30 gigawatt is polysilicon. Where we are overachieving is inverters. So that's the two pillars on both ends of the graph. But where we completely lacking out is ingots, wafers, a little less so on cells, and a little less also on modules. But it is clear that we are not anywhere near for most of the supply chain steps to the 30 gigawatt that the European Commission wanted to achieve by 2030. Just also putting that into perspective with the 70 gigawatt of deployment that we would need to see here in this graph. So to zoom in a little bit more, where do we have manufacturing capacities? This is a map from one of our latest reports showing the state of play. So we've been doing an analysis together with Fraunhofer ISE recently to look into not just where we do have manufacturing, but also how much it is used. And then also looking at the cost gap. I will be bringing you a slide a little later on. But first, look at where do we still have manufacturing capacity. So first of all, we have to distinguish between the capacity that we have, and you have the different colors here. Blue is polysilicon, orange is ingots, rose is wafers, solar cells is green, and modules is yellow. So the normal capacity there, we have polysilicon, 9 gigawatt. We have some solar cells with 4.8 gigawatt and modules with a little bit more than 12 gigawatt. But then if you look at how much is operating, that is much less. Same for polysilicon, but in operation of that capacity is 2.9 on the cells side and 6.7 on the module side. So that means, and that's if you're going down in the legend, there's quite some capacity that stands idle. And we also had some closures, as you know, 2024, 2025. So around about 5 gigawatt of module manufacturing that has been closed, and also some on ingots, so leaving us without any ingot capacity. So that's the state of play. Now let's look into what is planned. Let's look at the sunny side of things, because there's a lot of things moving at this point in time. So again, the color coding is the same. There are some announcements on the ingots and wafer side for 10 gigawatt. We also see a lot being announced on cells, so some 22 gigawatt and even more on modules, 32. So potentially, together with what we already have in Europe, with the slide I showed you just before, potentially, that would bring us to a sizable amounts when it comes to cells and modules, definitely, but also some sizable amounts when it comes to ingots and wafers. What I should mention is that also Italian companies are among those, as you can see here with Futura Sun and BE Solar. And what I didn't mention, obviously, is maybe I just go one slide back, is the Catania factory of 3 Sun and Suner, who are also Italian companies, who are among those companies that we already have or who are planning to gear up. Now, it's good to have plans, but without political support at European level, but also at national level, it is very difficult to turn these plans into practice. So let me elaborate a little bit what is happening at political level, but also very tangible on support by member states. Now, there was a ministerial meeting on solar and battery supply chains in October this year, so a couple of weeks ago in Brussels. Excuses for the quality of the picture. I hope you don't find it too difficult to find, to identify some of the faces. But basically, there's a couple of ministers and state secretaries who have been gathering to discuss what can be done in order to make sure that the rules that we have already set, and the main basically set of rules is the Net Zero Industry Act, that is now in the implementation phase, that should diversify manufacturing sources, but also make sure that we can support manufacturing in Europe. So to strengthen those rules. And one of the things that they have been discussing is to support more than before local content and EU preferences, but to also support EU-China partnerships under certain conditions. So obviously that has been a high-level exchange. Now we need to see what that means in practice, and some first discussions are already taking place while we speak, how such an intensified support for local content, for Made in Europe, could be put in practice, but also how partnerships could work. Now, what I wanted to share with you as well is something which I do think is very important for these discussions. And this is why we've been doing that study with Fraunhofer-ISE, to really look into, okay, what does it mean? What kind of support then do we need in order to bring back manufacturing to Europe and support those industries that we still have in Europe? And it is very clear from that analysis that, and that's no surprise, that there's a huge cost gap. What you see here is a very complicated slide, and we don't have time to go into each and every details. But what it basically shows is that if you would produce everything in Europe and that's the outmost left bar that you see, you would add up costs of around about 25 cents per watt peak, whereas on the very right side, the 8 cent per watt peak is the current PV market price. You see there's a huge gap. The scenarios in between are different levels of mixing European produced components with other components coming from outside of Europe. And the one with 13 cents per watt peak, that scenario is with imported components, imported products, but not from the main source, which is China, but from other Southeast Asian countries. Now, what does it tell us on the levelized costs of electricity? That's the right side of the graph. There's a difference in levelized costs of electricity translated from the different production costs, ranging between, depending on the scenario, between 6% more that you pay on the market, on the current market price, up to 14% more that you have as LCOE when you use the products fully made in Europe. So quite a sizable cost gap. But at the same time, and that's what we also show in the study. So maybe just first drawing conclusions. So there's no question that beyond the NZIA, so the Net Zero Industry Act, additional measures are needed in order to make sure that the Net Zero Industry Act is not only attracting products which are not coming from the main source of supply, but is coming at the moment from other Southeast Asian countries, because that's the second cheapest option. So if we want the Net Zero Industry Act to also deliver on boosting European solar manufacturing, additional measures are needed. And why should we do it? This is also something that we're showing in the study very clearly, because reshoring solar manufacturing, apart from all the other benefits, for example, on the know-how, we still have some world-known research institutes here in Europe. So apart from that, it can create thousands of jobs, and it can also add to the revenues of governments. So you will be adding the least to creation of jobs and creation of revenues for governance if you go down scenario 3. So that's the most right scenario here on the slide, which is buying from Southeast Asia. That's cheapest, but that is also bringing the least socioeconomic benefits to Europe. If you look at scenario 1 and scenario 2, scenario 1 is fully made in Europe. Scenario 2 is a mixture of components, partly made in Europe, partly imported. You do see that the benefits are higher. The investment needs are higher, but then also the benefits on job creation, but also on revenues that governments get back on their investments are higher. So it is clear that this is something governments should look like. So now the only question is how. So what we do, what we have seen in our analysis is that it is very clear that policymakers need to establish a EU-level output-based support. So money, we need money that is supporting the uptake of those manufacturing plans. We need to have financial support for the scale up, and that needs to cover not just CapEx, not just supporting on investment costs, but clearly also OpEx, operational costs. So we need to cover the cost gap, or need to have help to cover the cost gap, both on CapEx and OpEx. What we have been putting forward in the discussions is some kind of manufacturing facility or manufacturing bank, very similar to what we have seen in hydrogen, which is covering the delta and which is making it possible for those projects to scale up. And then the second how member states, how the European policymakers can support is to implement the net zero industry policies swiftly, including made in Europe bonus points to support EU-made modules. And I hope you still hear me, because I saw that I was freezing, but I hope at least you still heard me and the connection seems to be back. Now, just quickly, because, you know, this Net Zero Industry Act is not fully implemented yet, so we do not see the full scale of benefits from the Net Zero Industry Act in Europe yet. Member states need to implement non-price criteria, so that's the gist, that's the main element that the Net Zero Industry Act introduces, so not just tenders or public procurement based on price only, but also non-price criteria, different non-price criteria. So the member states need to now implement that as of end of this year. So as of next year, basically, we need to see these policies. And for public procurement, that needs to happen mid next year. So some member states are already gearing up. And Italy is a very good example. And I just want to show you some other examples as well. How are member states implementing? Not so many yet, but indeed, Italy is one of the front runners. I'm going to skip this slide, obviously, because you are much more experts than I am on the transitional fair X decree. Everyone is looking at Italy, I have to say, because Italy is showing one of the possibilities how to make sure that European manufacturing is supported and that the Net Zero Industry Act is transposed in a meaningful way. But there is 2 other member states that are also implementing some beneficial rules I wanted to bring to your attention, one of which is Austria, where there's a made in EU bonus as of June this year. 2 calls have already been organized, and the essence of this bonus scheme is that funding is made available for key PV components. So a bonus rate applies for PV modules up to 20%, same for inverters, up to 20%, and also electricity storage system, a bonus up to 20%. What is interesting in this scheme is that components must be verified and must be on a whitelist. So the verification needs to happen by accredited institutions. And Austria also has made sure that there is a detailed definition of what qualifies as manufactured in Europe. So for all these different components, there is also a clear, detailed definition on what qualifies for manufactured in Europe. And then the other example I wanted to highlight is France, where there's an updated C&I solar, where there are updated C&I solar tender rules. That's for the rooftop segment for systems between 100 and 500 kilowatt. The first round already happened, where some 192 megawatt were looked at in the first round, and there's some 5 more rounds that will be happening in 2026. This is really an implementation of the Net Zero Industry Act, and we're very much looking forward to seeing what it yields. There's a flat cap in the pricing that you see here on the slides, and it is really hopefully supporting those projects, and there are some projects in France that are gearing up and scaling up their manufacturing capacities. Last thing I wanted to mention is that apart from supporting manufacturing with industrial strategy, it is also very important to make sure that products that are used in Europe are following ESG standards, and hopefully European manufactured products have a clear advantage when it comes to that. So this is why we have been setting up a couple of years ago, we started that project already, the Solar Stewardship Initiative. The Solar Stewardship Initiative, in short SSI, is making sure that we bring transparency to supply chains, making sure that components, that products can be traced. It should bring the benefits that, so we're not reinventing the wheel. We are aligning this initiative with international standards, but it should bring the benefit also to the markets that the audit burden is reduced, because there is central audits that are happening. By now, we have 14 certified manufacturing sites that is covering around about 114 gigawatt of module capacity. That is third-party audited and certified. The traceability assessments launched with the first assessments conducted and pending certifications. And what is also, I think, very, very important to say is that the goal is really by 2028 that we have 100% of the exported modules, so basically imported to Europe, but also UK and Switzerland, so the EEA, come from SSI certified sites, and then obviously also including those products manufactured in Europe, which then also hopefully get this certification, where it should also be easier to do the audits. So if you want to know more about it, here is a QR code you can scan and get more information about the Solar Stewardship Initiative. So this has been a run through where we do stand, not just market-wise, but also when it comes to manufacturing. I really do hope that the further implementation of the Net Zero Industry Act is bringing more results, that we see more member states also taking up non-price criteria in their tendering, but also above all in their own public procurement. Just thinking about a lot of buildings that the military, for example, owns all over Europe, where there's a huge potential when it comes to public procurement and using that space, not just for military preparedness to be covered with solar, but then also using European-made products. So public procurement, tendering, and then also making sure that local content is as much as possible also used, and not just, being compliant with Net Zero Industry Act, where you could also diversify your supplies, is the goal. And I do hope that next year, around that time, when hopefully I can join you in person, we have some more good news to share. I wish you all the best for the further conference, and happy indeed to be with you, hopefully another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we see you next year.